Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today we're looking at the 2026 Florida governor primary election results. On the Republican side, we're breaking them all down, what happened in this race and what this all means for the general election. So unsurprisingly, Byron Donalds, who was the heavy favorite heading into election day, did end up winning the primary. That much was not really too much of a shock, though the overall vote totals, especially for one of the candidates, did end up being a pretty considerable surprise. Donalds ends up getting about 47.8% of the vote. Lieutenant Governor of the state of Florida, Jay Collins, gets 25.16% of the vote. James Fishback, who was talked about the most online as the opposition candidate to Byron Donalds, finishes in a very distant third place, getting only 10.46% of the total vote. Paul Renner, the former, I believe it's House Speaker in Florida, gets 8.54% of the vote. Bobby Williams gets 4.09%. Rachel Rodriguez gets 1.63%. Then the rest of the candidates all running get less than 1% of the vote in the state of Florida. So unsurprisingly, again, Donalds comes in, he wins this race by a lot. Not really too much of a shock that was expected heading into it. But Collins doing well, getting up to 25.16% of the votes. A little bit of a surprise, though. I did note in my prediction that I was expecting Collins to get around 20% of the voters. So being the lieutenant governor of the state of Florida, also there were rumblings in the final few days that his campaign was kind of surging in the last few polls that there was, with a good amount of undecided vote left. A lot of these primaries that can be unpredictable with the undecided vote, sometimes just splitting the undecided vote among the top candidates kind of results in the final numbers. Collins did seem to do that, getting about 25% of the vote. But Fishback is where things really surprised, because there was even a poll from TPSI in the final few days that showed Fishback getting, I think, like 29% of the vote or 31% of the vote or something like that. And the expectation was he would probably not win, but he would get at least 20% of the vote and make this race more interesting and more competitive. But Fishback, as the election night went on, just never really materialized that. He never won any counties. He literally did not win a single county. In a lot of counties, he didn't even finish in the top three. You go up here to the Panhandle, for instance, and Escambia County, Donalds in first, Collins in second, Renner in third, Fishback nowhere to be seen. Santa Rosa County, Fishback does barely squeak into the top three here. Okaloosa County, he doesn't. Walton County, he doesn't. In Washington County, he doesn't. Bay County, he doesn't. There's a lot more counties where you thought, well, maybe Fishback be able to win them. And it's more, he didn't even get into the top three in a lot of these places. In terms of overall margin here and where Donalds did very well, of the nearly 1.7 million votes cast across the state of Florida, Donalds gets about 800,000, Jay Collins about 420,000, Fishback about 176,000. And the margins here you've seen across the state, you got to go to the big cities in Florida, even though it's a Republican primary and a lot of the rural votes. Obviously, for Florida, the rural numbers are a lot larger than a lot of other states where the tiny areas still have like thousands of voters coming out of them. But you look at the big areas, you look at Miami, it was one. I'll stick with the circles for now. We'll go Miami-Dade. The county itself was won by Donalds, 57.78%. Collins finishes in second at 15.9%. Fishback only 8.65%. Donalds getting 51,000 votes out of Miami-Dade alone. In Fort Lauderdale and Broward County, Donalds gets about 56% to Collins about 19%, nearly 20% of the vote. West Palm Beach County, this is obviously the area where President Trump and Mar-a-Lago's headquarters and base is. Donalds here gets 58.8%, Collins 17.99%, Fishback getting 11% of the vote in West Palm Beach. I'm going to go back to the results tab as well here. You just see in a lot of these areas in the state of Florida, they're all won very strongly by Byron Donalds, who I forgot to mention was the Trump-endorsed candidate. So again, not really too much of a surprise. Collier County, where the city of Naples is. This is where Byron Donalds is from. This is going to be one of his stronger areas. And Donalds wins at 65.8% of the vote to Collins 16.3%. Heading up into the Fort Myers areas in Lee County, another big win for Donalds, 64.9 to 16.23. Sarasota goes for Donalds 48.5 to Collins 25.9. Also, as we get closer to Tampa, I do believe this is where Jay Collins is from. I do believe he's from the Tampa area, but still, Donalds does very well here. Heading into Tampa in the St. Pete area, we'll go at Hillsborough County first. Donalds wins Hillsborough County 44.35%, though Collins loses it, again, being from this area. He does do very strongly, getting 30.38% of the vote, or outrunning his statewide margin by about 5% in this county. Fishback does actually do better than his own statewide result here as well, getting 11.67% of the vote in Tampa and Hillsborough County. In Pinellas County, where St. Pete and Clearwater are, Donalds gets 49.76%, Collins gets about 27.08%, Fishback gets 9.9% there. Going up here and towards Polk County, competitive, only difference about 4,000 votes or nearly 5,000 votes between Donalds and Collins in this county, but Donalds does win there as well. Orlando and Orange County, about 48-23 for Donalds over Collins. Daytona Beach and Volusia County goes for Donalds over Collins as well. Ocala and Marion County, 42-30 for Donalds there. Up near St. Augustine, St. John's, Donalds wins 43 to about 24. Jacksonville goes to Donalds 43.2, 22.67 for Collins. And then you get into some of the few areas of the state that Jay Collins did win. There was Hardy County, a smaller population county that Collins was able to narrowly win. But then this part of the state of Florida, where it's sort of right, it's north of Tampa, it's obviously northwest of Orlando, west of Gainesville and Ocala, and in between Tallahassee and Gainesville. This is the only part of the state, in addition to this part up here on the border as well, that voted for Jay Collins. Not as large in population as the rest of the state, obviously, where these large cities are, but Levy County, Dixie County, Taylor, Jefferson County, Madison, Hamilton, Sewanee, Columbia, they all vote, and Union County as well vote for Jay Collins. Tallahassee comes in big for Donalds, 43.93%, for Donalds, 25.02% for Jay Collins. Liberty County, Calhoun County, and Jackson County, Washington County, and Holmes County all come in for Jay Collins as well. And you can see the votes updating here throughout the bottom left, as there's over 95% in, but there is still a few handful of votes left to come in here. But overall, just look across the state. I mean, there were a few counties that Jay Collins won. I'm a little surprised, to be honest. If I thought Fishback would have done better, even though I did expect him to lose by a lot. But Jay Collins getting 25% of the vote is pretty similar to where I had him ultimately getting. But I thought Fishback would be around 20%. I thought Collins would be around 20%. But seeing Collins win a lot of these counties up here in northern Florida actually put up a pretty strong showing from Jay Collins, honestly, than I even thought. So that is a pretty good sign for Jay Collins. Again, this is the governor primary for 2026, but obviously speculation. Maybe Collins will run for Congress in a few years, or Senate or something in a few years, or maybe governor, depending how if Donalds wins the race. Obviously, probably won't run against him in 4 years, but all these conversations, I'm sure, will take place over the next little bit, because Jay Collins did honestly better than expected in a lot of these areas across the state of Florida, where Fishback definitely faltered. I don't know if this is the last we're going to hear of James Fishback, but this primary showing definitely was not what he was hoping for, without a doubt. No doubt there. Just one final look at the margin map here, and this is why, again, Donalds won by so big. Even in these areas that Jay Collins won, just the vote numbers here were very small compared to the rest of the state, where these little yellow circles, like the votes start to add up. Again, he gets about 400,000 votes or so. But I mean, look at it. Like Pinellas County alone, 40,000 votes. Tampa alone, 40,000. Lee County, 54. Miami, 51. Collier County, 30,000. Fort Lauderdale, Broward County, 31. Like these just large amounts of votes throughout the state of Florida. Donalds wins these very strongly and now heads to the general election. So that's obviously next where we're going to pivot to. The general election in the state of Florida. We do know Byron Donalds won the primary. David Jolly, the Democrat, also won his primary. I'm not going to do a full breakdown of that one, but David Jolly won rather handily. Now we go to the general election, where the rankings here are a little split between solid Republican, likely Republican, and lean Republican in this race, which does make it honestly pretty interesting to cover here. The polls are kind of similar to the primary ones, where Donalds is getting about 45% of the vote, but there's a lot of undecided votes still. David Jolly seems to be running pretty competitive in a lot of these polls thus far. Obviously, the Democratic pollsters like Hart Research shows Jolly up by 1. Change Research shows him up by 1 as well. University of North Florida, which is not a partisan poll, has Donalds up by about 5, but still 6% undecided and 7% saying they want someone else. Target Market Research, which I don't know if it is sponsored by James Madison Institute, a conservative think tank, shows it about a 7-point race among likely voters and only a 4-point race among registered voters. So definitely still missing a good amount of recent non-biased polling in this race. The Emerson poll from back in March showed about a 5-point race with a lot of undecided. So we're not expecting a 20-point Ron Desantis victory like we saw in 2022 for Donalds versus Jolly. This looks to be more of a competitive race, but I definitely think this is one where the Republicans are heavily favored to win. The question will be ultimately the margin of victory when everything is said and done. In terms of some of the forecasters that I like to look at for my videos, obviously, Polsmax currently has Donalds defeating Jolly by about 7 points. Race to the White House currently has Donalds defeating Jolly by about 5.5% or so. Vote Hub has Florida going for Donalds over Jolly about 7.8%. So far, of these three, I think the Vote Hub one is more in line with where my predictions are. They're all likely Republicans, so there's not really too much of a disparity on that, but I do think the Vote Hub one of about 7.8% right now is where I'd probably put it. So for Florida, obviously on the map, I would put it around a likely Republican ranking, which I do utilize the JJ election map margins here, which is 5 or 15 points and over is safe, 5 to 15 is likely, 1 to 5 is lean, and then 1 and under is tilt. So for my rankings, I have it as likely Republican, right around that 8 to 9 point margin of victory for Donalds over Jolly right now. But that's where things are ultimately in the Florida governor Republican primary. Byron Donalds cleans up, wins big as expected. The main story here is that Jay Collins did very strongly in second place. James Fishback definitely cratered in third place. And now we're on to the general election for Byron Donalds versus David Jolly. I know there's been a lot of buildup, obviously. My video on the final prediction for this race did very, very well. Thank you everyone who took time out of your day to watch that. I really appreciate it. So obviously this is a very important governor's race, a very passionate one from the people of Florida. So if you watch that video and you're watching this video again as well, I really appreciate you doing so. And I really appreciate if you hit like and leave a comment below as well, telling me your thoughts on this race and what happens going forward from there. Also make sure to hit subscribe as well so you get notified when I post a new video, which I do every single day. For now though, that is it. Thank you so much for watching and hope to see you in a future video. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you did, I really appreciate it if you could hit like and hit subscribe as well. It really helped me and my channel out a whole lot if you could do that for me. You can see in the circle in the top left the subscribe here button to subscribe to the channel. On the right, there are going to be 2 video pop-ups for you. My latest video will be on the top and a recommended playlist by myself will be on the bottom as well. In the bottom left of the screen, you'll see my channel name, Anthony's Election Center, which you are currently watching. On my Facebook, Anthony.ElectionCenter is also there. And if you want to reach out to me on email, anthpredicts@gmail.com is my email. Feel free to pause the video if you need to. If you want to look for any of these, obviously in more time, please feel free. But for now, though, that is it. I really thank you all for watching and hope to see you in a future video.